So welcome to another solitaire wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander. Today we're taking a look at Warfighter World War II North Africa from Danvers and Games, DVG. Now, if you've been around the channel for a while, Warfighter World War II specifically is one of my favorite solo games, solo systems. Me and Grant play a lot cooperatively. Really enjoy that when we can both play together. And this is just a really fun, either solo or team-based kind of solo romp. It's very pulpy, it's a great storyteller, good narratives in it. Now, this is the most recent release from DVG in this series. So, they just came out with North Africa and then Mediterranean core set. And we're going to talk about Mediterranean separately because we're going to play that, and you'll get a bit more coverage because they are a little bit different. A lot of the stuff is the same, but thematically, a lot of the stuff that you have in the box is very different. So we're just going to talk today about the North Africa core set because that's what I've been playing for the past week and a half. I played a bunch of scenarios in it and kind of gotten through some of the meat of especially what's in the core set. Again, like a lot of DVG's games and any of the other Warfighter lines, there's a bunch of extras and expansions and things that you can get. And if you watch the unboxing video of all this, you can see a lot of that, of what's available. But today we're going to talk about the core set. If you were to buy just the core set, what is that like? Well, as far as I'm concerned, Warfighter World War II is a really good kind of just a beer and pretzels, light fare war game. What I mean by that is that it is not particularly complicated, although it does have a big rulebook, but you don't really need half the rulebook. And it's not particularly like serious and like intense. Like this is supposed to be an enjoyable solo game where there's some kind of puzzly aspects of resource management and target acquisition, like priorities and things like that, and you're trying to race against the clock to get your objectives done as well. So all of those things are right up my alley. Again, if you've been around here a bit, you know that we love games like Gloomhaven or Frosthaven, and this, whilst mechanically and thematically is very different, those same concepts are very present here, right? Not particularly complicated, a little bit of hand management with your cards, you're trying to work together to solve an objective, and it is time-based, and it's trying to puzzle your way through some of this stuff, and at the end of it you look back, and you have this really fun little story that was told of this particular mission. So, what does the mission look like? Well, in this particular game, you have a deck of cards that are your soldiers, and there's 3 different types of soldiers. You got your player soldiers, that's kind of like your main guys that you're playing. Then there are non-player soldiers, and you typically have like good abilities like a player soldier, but they don't have a hand of cards, so you got to kind of help them along. And then you have squad soldiers, and squad soldiers are kind of your minor NPCs, if you think about it that way. They have like all of their attacks printed on their cards, and they don't typically have a ton of extra stuff, and it's all self-contained in one card. They're less sprawling with the things that they can and can't do. And you're going to build a team, and you have a set number of points based on what mission you're trying to do. You have a little mission card. You're going to build a team, and each of the different soldiers has a value that you're going to put up against that cost, and then you're going to give them any extra gear or any extra skills, things like that. And then you're going to progress through a series of cards, effectively, and then they're like numbered areas. So you might have a mission, and the mission says, pick or randomly draw an objective and put it 9 spaces away. And that means there's going to be 8 cards in between that you have to travel through and fight your way through to get to the objective. And then when you're at the objective card will say, hold this for a certain number of turns, or make a hand-to-hand attack against the person here, or destroy a certain number of things, or, kill the officer who's here that's screened by stuff. All sorts of different little bits and pieces like that. And so that's really what this game is. It's built your little squad, which is very DVG, right? If you've played it in their Leader series games, it's a lot of that kind of thing where it's about squad and resource management, and then progressing through these geographic locations, which are kind of lined out on a board, and you kind of choose to an extent how they come out and the order in which they come out, progressing through those, clearing any enemies out, dealing with any reinforcements that might be coming in, making your way to the objective, solve the objective. So I hope that conveys a little bit of why, what I mean by when you get some of the puzzly aspects, especially if you're doing this co-op, figuring out what I can do, what you can do, what cards we have and don't have, making best use of those to get through things efficiently, to try to avoid taking as many wounds as possible, because as guys start dying, you then have fewer options, it's harder to complete your objectives, right? All the things that you would expect from something like that. But the puzzling nature of this is something that I love. You know, you're moving certain guys here and there, but then some of them might be a marksman with a sniper rifle. Well, he's much better at long range, so I'm going to keep him back, and then the other guys are going to move forward. But in doing so, I'm going to get reinforcements where my forward guys are and where that guy is. And he's not very good if people show up in his space. So do I leave someone else to help protect him, right? As a little overwatch for the sniper? There's all these little bits and pieces of figuring out how to do things and do them well that I really appreciate in a solitaire game. And but mechanically, it really is not that complicated, right? I've played a lot of games, a lot of complex rules books. The rules book in this one is a little bit silly, at least at first glance. We get the rules tome, and this is the new edition. Actual pages of rules, 94 pages of rules. Now, before that terrifies you, this is a combined rule book for Warfighter Fantasy, Warfighter World War II, Warfighter Cold War, Warfighter Modern, and Warfighter Near Future. Now, some of these haven't been released yet, but they have rules in them that pertain to some of that stuff. Like, you won't use, if you buy Warfighter World War II, you don't use at least 50% of this rule book. And a lot of the stuff is just explaining it to you, and then what's going to happen is, you're going to play this game, especially for the first time. You're going to read through the rules, and as long as you understand, what you can and can't do with your cards, and how to place enemies, almost everything else in this game is done through keywords, and they have what is also now, it's getting a bit bigger. This is from 2002. This is the latest one. They have this little booklet of keywords, and again, you're not going to read this, because you're going to use from this little booklet probably 5 or 6 of these. And you're probably going to use like 2 or 3 at any given time. So I've got, for example, let's see if I've got one. So I've got someone here, Mr. Kendall, and it says 1 hardy hot. And you can look up in this little thing, which is alphabetical, what that means. EFG. And it says little hardy over here, and explains specifically what that keyword means. A lot of the other things that are listed, it's stuff that's explained on there, skill cards, things like that. But every so often you have a few keywords. A lot of the time, the keywords come out on enemies. So, for example, there's this little scouting force, this little German scouting force that comes up. And at the bottom of that card, it says, maintain 1. Well, I don't got to read that in a rule book, because when that guy comes up, not every card has that on it. I just quickly look up the M, and it says maintain 1, and it tells you what that little rule is. Great. I know exactly what that is. I know how that works. Oh, look, another one came up with that. Great, I already know it, or I can reference it really quick. But once that guy's dead, I don't got to worry about that rule no more, There's a lot of that stuff. Let's see if I've got any other ones. So this guy here, this is an SDK of Z9. This is a half track, and it's got a bunch of keywords. It says 1939 plus. That just tells you which missions you can use it in. Vehicle is a keyword. Immobile 1 is a keyword, and +1 size is a keyword. You can look up all of those in this little reference, and you know exactly what it is and what it can and can't do. Some of those things aren't even like explained in the keywords bit, because it's something else will play off of that. But like, don't be terrified by the rulebook when you get the game. That's really all I'm trying to convey. Because and especially once you played it a couple times, the game is very easy to pick up. We actually hadn't played this for a while. We played a lot of Pacific and a lot of Europe. And then when these came out, I got it all out, put it all out, and was almost immediately started playing. And it was, more than a lot of other games, it felt like it was just like going back to a very familiar friend. Like, I knew all the rules, I knew some of the things that you can and can't do and what to look for in certain situations, and it was just really fun. And that's the crux of what this game is. This game isn't meant to be some super serious simulation and some deep exploration of, you know, all the different things that you might find in some war games. This is a fun beer and pretzels, almost like a run and gun, very pulpy game. If you think about some of those old comic books from the 50s and even 60s, you know, Sergeant America or whatever, you know, he's got his little Tommy gun and his little stogie and his hat with his chin straps undone, running around blasting up Germans. You can think about that game in this way, and that's a totally valid way to think about it, because you're moving your squad through, taking out enemies, and it's like, you know, and running around, get your objective, boom, when you're done. Or you can, you know, think about it a bit more seriously. You can do that. You know, taking a little bit of care here and there and trying to do it as best you can. And when the guys fall, you're like, oh, it's, you know, a little bit of an RPG in a way. But all in all, it's supposed to be a very fun game. Now, I have talked for a little bit. I will show you how some of this works. You know, it's not that complicated, so stick with us. And afterwards, I'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. If you've played Warfighter before, you'll recognize the map layout. It's identical to previous editions of World War II, but it's just got the desert theme and the colors and the background, and the different kind of icons under here as well are different. It does come with its own new action deck, which says North Africa Action Deck on it, and again the locations and the events, the missions, and everything else is new and themed for this. What you can actually see set up here is actually the Battle of Bardia Expansion 72. So you will not recognize any of this stuff from your core games, but this just happens to have what I have set up at the moment when I'm making the video. But it's all the same stuff, except like some of the locations and then the nationalities of things you're fighting against. In the core set, you get you have British soldiers that you play with, and you have German hostile decks. In this one, we have Australian soldiers, and we're going against Italian hostiles. That's just what comes in this expansion, along with new missions and locations, effectively. So, I know that's might not be very helpful for this video, but that's what we got. But basically, how this works is you have a soldier, and he's got a little value up here. This is his RP, his resource points, and you'll load them up with weapons that also have resource points, ammunition, grenades, special actions and abilities. And you can do that up to the resources listed on your mission. So this mission is Bardia or Bust, and you can have 52 points on your squad. So this is 16, 17, 18, 19 points right here. In this particular mission, I also had Hart, who's only worth 14 points, and he has the Bren gun printed on his card, so he brings that along for free. You don't have to pay the 9 for that. And then we also had Steed, and I gave him an SMLE rifle. He has a bunch of extra skill cards that he gets for free that are printed, that are his little special abilities. Means he's was very, very helpful. But you're going to have a bunch of those guys, and then onto those cards, you're going to put like a number, and then they have a corresponding counter that you move on the board. So you're going to keep all of your guys off board, and you just have this little number 2 This guy represents this with all of his ammunition and guns and weapons and skills. So, if you can see the board is divided up into these columns, and then there's this row at the bottom for your mission, and your mission says put the objective on space number 6. This is space number 6, and that's kind of hard to see, but it's there, it's faint. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in between those two that you are going to place locations from the location deck that you're going to draw from, and you're going to place and move through those. Enemies are going to pop up, you're going to have to fight those, you're going to have to fight the terrain itself, the terrain's going to have effects that you have to go through, and you're going to move your way through these different locations to get to your objective, and the objective says eliminate all hostiles on this site, and then there's some keywords that there's collateral damage here, and there's also a structure as well. So you always start with a mission and an objective, and you have to fill in the pathway between the two, fight your way there, and do what the objective says. Some objectives say to like have this space clear of hostiles for a certain number of rounds. You have to hold that ground. Some of them are like take out this specific guy, or some is like do a demolition mission where you have to, you know, expend a certain number of explosive attacks, and you've like blown up a building, so to speak, or a supply dump, right? There's all sorts of things like that. So how do you do that? Well, there's different types of soldiers. This is a regular soldier. His name's Dunch. This one here, it's Heart, but it says NPS, and that stands for non-player soldier. So he's kind of like a more minor character in this game. But anyone who doesn't have anything like that, he's going to have a hand of cards equal to his health value. And so you're going to draw from the action deck, which is this big old deck. The other half's over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hand of 6 cards. And these are going to have different actions that you can do, extra things that break all the rules. But each character, generally speaking, has 2 actions that they can take on their turn. Now, if you've got 4 or 5 soldiers, they all have 2 actions each. There are some soldiers, this guy actually has 3 actions if he's at 2 hit points. If he takes 1 hit, he goes down to 2, and then takes another one, he's dead. This guy has 6 health, but he only has the 2 actions. There are skills, like I think there was like combat, like veteran, gives you an extra action, I think it was. So you can get more actions in games, but generally you're going to have 2 actions. And what can you spend your actions on? Well, on player actions. You spend an action to its used side, and you can move, for example. To move, you use your little movement value. He has a movement value of 3. And this location, this Gorfer, has an entrance value of 4. So we need to get 1 more movement than this 3. Well, actually, this guy has add 1 movement to the value of all soldiers because of his leadership. So technically his leadership is actually a 4, hence the little mnemonic here. So he can move into here, no big deal. If you can't meet that requirement, for example, let's say Mr. Steed down here, he's only got a 2 movement value. Sure, it's modified by +1 for the leadership, so he actually has a 3. That's still not enough to get to 4. When he moves, you can discard one of your action cards as a resource. Kind of you pay 1 for 1 to get up to what you need. So you only got to pay 1, and he could move in, for example. Why this gets really hairy really quickly is if, for example, this enemy is here, if he is at full health, that's +2 entrance cost, so this would be a 6. So it's really hard to move into this location because there's a machine gun team, right? And it makes thematic sense. The machine gun team is firing at you, making it very difficult to move out into the open, to move into this terrain, right? They're covering your movement and pinning you down. Really neat little pieces of theme in just these tiny little keywords to go on. So you can move for an action, you can shoot for an action, and whatever weapon you have, you're going to shoot that weapon. And there's a couple of little charts here that you're going to roll. You can either shoot in semi-automatic mode with the Thompson or in auto mode, and that tells you here 1 and 3 how many dice you're going to roll. So there's 2 rolls that you make when you're making an attack. You need to roll to hit on your to hit table, and this is at range 0, so you can only attack in the column you're in. Range 1 is the next column over, range 2 is the next one after that. So let's say he's in here, great. That's our second action. We moved in and we can shoot. To shoot, we're going to roll a number of d10s equal to which mode we're shooting in. We're going to roll 3, and we need to hit on 7s to score a hit. However, it's not just d10s to hit. You also roll a d6 for your cover/penetration roll. This guy has a 4 cover value. And that's important because you not only have to be on target, but you also have to penetrate their cover to get them. So this guy, for example, he's got 2 cover. That's not very good. This guy has 4 cover. That's extremely good. Especially because in the Golfer, hostiles gain +1 cover against ranged attack. Well, guess what? This is a ranged attack. So you got to hit a 5 on a d6, and you got to succeed on these dice, getting a 7 or more, to kill people. If you fail at one of these, let's say we scored a bunch of hits with the dice, well, that's 2 hits, but we didn't penetrate, we're still going to put some suppress markers down. Conversely, if we hit with this, but we miss with all our other dice, there's a little matrix over here, you're going to suppress them that way as well. So we're just going to roll the dice, we're rolling full auto, because why not? And I rolled, that's funny. So I rolled, this is a 4 +1 cover is 5, this little +1 cover marker, right, is 6. So I penetrate their cover, however, all of my actual shots were misses, they were inaccurate. And so what I would do here is I would put suppress markers out. So we're going to put out 1 suppress marker. And we do that because no matter how many dice you roll, you only ever do 1 hit. Unless you have, for example, if you have the Bren gun and you deploy the bipod to gain spray. If you have the spray keyword means you can hit with every single one of these. But we didn't do that, unfortunately, and that sucks. Now, if any of our d10s had been on this reload chart of 2, if we roll a 2 or less on any one of these, this ammo would get flipped over to its empty side, and we would have to spend another action, which we don't have, to clear this and discard it to be able to shoot again. So that's the risk of shooting at auto is, yeah, you might be more likely to hit. Oh my gosh, that was a terrible roll. But you're also much more likely to burn through your ammo. And it's, again, a really neat little aspect to the game. But if you have that Bren gun, you can chuck a bunch of dice, and it's possible, and I've seen it, you can hit really well, and you can just wipe cards. And you know, this guy has a 2 reticle, got 2 hit points. If you apply 2 EKIAs by succeeding on both types of dice, he's dead and he's gone, and you get this much experience, and you can spend your experience to power your action cards, because some of these action cards, you upgun them, right? So this says, play when you are paying an entrance cost, add 3 to your movement value. Great. Or I can spend an experience to play when any soldier is paying an entrance cost. Add 3 to any soldier's movement value. So you spend experience to kind of power up your cards, walk it off. You may heal 1 or discard 1 suppress counter. Or I can spend an experience, which again I gained from killing people, to any soldier may heal 1 or discard a suppress counter. You may perform an attack without spending an action. Or I can spend that experience, any soldier may do that. So I've used up all of my actions, but I've got this snapshot in my hand. Great, let's have another go. Let's shoot at full auto again, just because we want to do another hit to this guy. And unfortunately for me, we rolled very poorly. So, we don't penetrate, so at best I can do a suppress. And so we roll a suppress, because we suppress them with one of our dice. Again, you can only apply 1 result per roll, unless you have spray. However, we rolled a 2, which hits our reload, so next turn, we're going to have to reload. But this guy is half dead and suppressed, so when it comes to his turn, he's not going to be able to do anything. So that's also good. Like, the suppression in this game is almost as important as doing kills and stuff like that. The suppression's going to get removed, and you have to keep dealing with that, but That's what we're doing. But basically, that's what this game is it's managing your hand of cards, discarding cards, spending cards to enhance your moves, your attacks. You can save up a bunch of actions, go into close combat, and start doing that, which is really fun. Getting to your objective to complete your objective. It's a game a little bit puzzly of managing your team and working out who can do what and what weapons we get them out with, and how they fight with those weapons and things like that. But that's generally how the core of this game works. You're progressing through almost like a side scroller, like an old video game. Enemies pop up. You got to get them out of the way because some of the effects on them are really bad. So, for example, this guy pops up. You place him in the rearmost. So let's say we hadn't moved out of there. This guy, when he pops up, he's going to get put in the rearmost, and soldiers cannot leave this location. So these guys pin him here until this is dead, so he can't progress beyond that. So then it's like, stop our progress, turn around, everyone's going to try to shoot these guys, and then move on. And you're doing all of this up against the clock, and the clock is typically very tight, especially when things start to go wrong. The enemy's turn is that there are these reinforcement values, so more of them might pop up. You're never quite safe. They're going to all attack you based on who they pulled from this chit to target. Mr. Number 2 is going to try to shoot Mr. Number 2. Same with 2 and 1s. They're going to shoot the 1 and 2 guys. And then they're going to kind of close range on you, and then it's back to you, and you get all your actions back on your whole team, and it's trying to make some more progress, trying to kill some more guys. All the suppressors come off, and we got to resuppress them, all that kind of stuff. But that's mostly how the game works. What I'll do is I'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the game. And remember, today we're doing a solitaire review. You're going to see some other co-op stuff from us, especially with Med, because we've got plans to play that here pretty soon. And as a solo game, I love this. I think it's really enjoyable, but I also really like Pacific and Europe. I love Warfighter World War II. We've played a couple of the other iterations, some of the more modern stuff, and I just don't connect with it as much. The Shadow War one, where it's just like all you're trying to do is stealth and be quiet, is less interesting because you don't do any of the kind of insane stuff. It's just like, I tried to be as quiet as possible through every space, and then I plink my one subsonic ammo. Boop. That's okay. It's fine. But to me, the Warfighter World War II stuff is really, really fun. The desert provides some very interesting kind of terrains. The locations that you have, some of them are very different, especially when you compare them to something like Pacific or Europe. The terrains are something that does stick out as where you're like, okay, these are very different terrain types, and the things that they do and what you can do with them and the effects that they have on subsequent terrains is very interesting. The mission types that you have, I think, again, are different enough. There's some really tough missions in this one, that's for sure. And what I did note, and I presume they do this with all of them, now I think back on it, but I did feel like in this one, the variety in the mission lengths in this game is really good. You've got really short intro missions that's like four spaces and 7 turns or whatever. Or you've got the really big ones that are 13 spaces. Or, well, I guess 11 is as far as it goes. But you can go all the way across the map with 2 objectives, one halfway through and one at the end, and it takes a really, really long time. You can go as big or small as you want, even with just what's in the game. And the other thing that is, at least as far as I'm concerned, is new, it was new in this edition for me at least, is that they did have a sheet of status counters. And hallelujah, frankly. The status counters are things like +1 to cover, -1 hostile, +1 to attack. Because a lot of that stuff is written on cards, and they're written on an ability that I did, but I threw that action card away, or it's because of this particular hostile that's in that location that gives that benefit or that detriment to that location. And so you can use these little counters to stick on the location as a mnemonic, and they work really, really well, and that is a huge improvement over prior editions of this game as well. I really appreciated that. But outside of that, this is you play as the British in this one, and you play against the Germans. You can kind of tell by the front here, I guess. But there's expansions. There's like a Desert Rats expansion. There's a Deutsche Afrika Korps expansion, and you can flip sides with some of those. But primarily, you will be playing as the British as you get this one, and you'll be fighting against the Germans. The game is just as enjoyable and just as fun as I wanted it to be. I love this system, so it's kind of like always going to be a big thumbs up from me. But I had a blast playing this, solo, and at some point, Grant and myself will also definitely play this co-op as well. And we'll probably play with like the Deutsche Afrika Korps expansion, which adds a lot of vehicles. We got the vehicles expansion, and you add all these, here's a bunch of tanks and half-tracks, but then you get to have all of these like anti-tank weapons, so you can lay out mines, and you have Piats and stuff, all this cool stuff. You can make this game anything that you want it to be with all the different expansions that you can get, but just the core set alone, to me, I have a blast playing this. It's well worth it as far as I'm concerned, and especially if you're, you just want something that's a bit more casual. But it doesn't always have to be the most serious and heavy and hardcore wargaming. And these just tell great little stories. When a tank comes driving by and you have the option to evade it by ditching some experience that's hard earned. It's everyone dives in the ditch and the tank drives over and the ground's shaking. You're like, please don't see us. And then it drives off and you hit really well. Like, yeah, it's just discarding some stuff and a card gets discarded. But the more you kind of put into the imagination and your little role-playing part of it, the better this game is. And it's mouth-watering at times. I really, really, really like this game. So I have yapped for a long time, but I appreciate you tuning in. This is Warfighter World War II North Africa from DVG. Big thumbs up. Check this out if you're interested, but appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.